I think I didn't do anything wrong, just made a joke at dinner. But the next morning, I got served official papers from my fiancé. Now everyone acts like I'm the villain, but I still don't see what the big deal is. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The candlelight flickered across the checkered tablecloth at Romano's Italian restaurant, casting warm shadows over what should have been a pleasant family dinner. Aurelia Dorsey smoothed her burgundy dress and glanced around the table at the assembled faces. Her fiancé Graham, both sets of parents, Graham's younger brother Simon, her best friend Linda, and their 7-year-old daughter Nora coloring quietly in her activity book. "This is nice," Aurelia announced, raising her wine glass with a theatrical flourish. "All of us together like this. Almost feels like we're already one big happy family." Graham's mother Marilyn offered a tight smile while adjusting her pearl necklace. "It's lovely, dear, though I do hope we can make these dinners a regular tradition after the wedding." Aurelia felt the familiar weight of expectation in Marilyn's words. Everything was always about the wedding, about becoming a proper wife, about fitting into their neat little suburban boxes. She took another sip of wine, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "Oh, speaking of the wedding," Victor Shields chimed in from across the table, his easy grin directed at Aurelia. "Have you two set a final date yet? I need to know when to clear my calendar for the bachelor party." Graham shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We're still discussing details." Details, Aurelia laughed, waving her hand dismissively. "Sometimes I think Graham would plan our entire lives down to the minute if I let him." Victor leaned forward, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Well, that's what accountants do, right? Everything in neat little columns." "Exactly." Aurelia felt a spark of excitement at being understood. Sometimes a girl needs a little spontaneity in her life. Graham's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I just think it's important to plan ahead, especially with Nora to consider." "Oh, Graham," Aurelia's mother Evelyn interjected with a dismissive wave. "You're only young once. Aurelia has always been spirited. That's what makes her special." Aurelia felt emboldened by her mother's support. The wine was making her feel bold, playful. She noticed how Victor's attention made her feel alive in a way that Graham's careful, measured responses never did. "You know what's funny?" Aurelia said, her voice carrying across the table with practiced timing. "Technically, since Graham and I aren't actually married yet, I suppose I could still try other men if I wanted to." The table fell silent. Victor let out a surprised laugh. "Aurelia, you're terrible." But Graham had gone completely still beside her, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. The color had drained from his face. "What?" Aurelia looked around the table, suddenly aware of the tension. "It was just a joke. God, you all look like someone died." Marilyn's lips had formed a thin, disapproving line. Simon was studying his pasta with intense focus. Nora had stopped coloring and was looking between her parents with wide, confused eyes. "Aurelia," Graham said quietly, setting down his fork. "That's not really appropriate." "Oh, come on," she rolled her eyes. "Don't be so uptight. It's just dinner conversation." "It's funny," Victor said, though his laugh sounded forced now. "She's got a point, technically speaking." Aurelia felt a flush of gratitude toward Victor for backing her up. "See? Victor gets it. Sometimes you need to lighten up, Graham." Graham's father cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should order dessert." "I think I've lost my appetite," Marilyn said coldly, folding her napkin with sharp, precise movements. "Mum," Simon said softly, but she was already reaching for her purse. Aurelia felt the evening slipping away from her, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I'm sorry if everyone's too sensitive for a little humor. I was just trying to make conversation." "That's our Aurelia," Evelyn said with forced brightness, always keeping things interesting. But Graham was already standing, pulling out his wallet. "I think we should go." Graham, don't be ridiculous, Aurelia said, but there was something in his expression that made her stomach clench. It was just a joke. I know, he said quietly, placing cash on the table. That's the problem. The drive home was silent except for Nora's quiet questions from the back seat. Why did Grandma Marilyn look mad? Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart, Graham said gently. You didn't do anything wrong. Aurelia stared out the passenger window, feeling defensive and confused. Everyone was overreacting. It had been a harmless comment, just a way to lighten the mood. Why couldn't anyone appreciate her sense of humor? Later that night, after Nora was tucked into bed, Aurelia found Graham sitting in their living room with all the lights off. The engagement ring, her engagement ring, was sitting in his palm, catching the moonlight from the window. What are you doing? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Graham looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but something deeper, something final. I'm thinking, he said quietly. About what? He closed his fingers around the ring. About whether the woman I fell in love with would have said what you said tonight. Aurelia felt a chill run down her spine, but she forced herself to laugh. Graham, you're being dramatic. It was just dinner conversation. He was quiet for so long that she almost thought he'd fallen asleep. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Was it? The next morning at the office, Aurelia sat in the break room stirring her coffee and replaying the previous night's events. Graham had been gone when she woke up. Probably left early for work, she assumed. He'd get over it. He always did. You look like you need caffeine and gossip, Linda Foster announced, sliding into the chair across from her. What happened at dinner last night? Your text sounded dramatic. Aurelia felt a spark of excitement. Finally, someone who would appreciate the absurdity of the situation. Oh my God, Linda, you won't believe how everyone overreacted. Tell me everything. So we're all sitting there, having this perfectly normal dinner, and I made this tiny little joke about how technically I'm not married yet, so I could try other men if I wanted to. Aurelia paused for dramatic effect. And Graham completely lost it. Linda's eyes widened. He lost it? Like yelling? No, worse. He went all silent and brooding, like I'd committed some terrible crime. Then his mother got all huffy and they basically ended the dinner early. Aurelia took a sip of coffee. Can you believe that? Over a harmless joke? Wait, Linda leaned forward conspiratorially. Was Victor there? Yeah, and he was the only one with a sense of humor about it. Everyone else acted like I'd announced I was joining a convent or something. Okay, but... Linda lowered her voice. You have been spending a lot of time with Victor lately. Aurelia felt her cheeks warm. We're friends. Graham's just insecure. Honey, Victor is gorgeous and single and clearly into you. I'm not judging. I'm just saying maybe Graham has a point to be concerned. That's exactly the problem, Aurelia said, her voice rising slightly. I'm 32 years old. I shouldn't have to ask permission to have male friends. If Graham can't handle that, maybe he's not as secure as I thought. Their conversation was interrupted by Janet from HR walking past with her morning coffee. She paused at their table. Morning, Aurelia. How was your dinner last night? You mentioned it was some big family thing. Aurelia saw an opportunity. Oh, it was interesting. Apparently I'm not allowed to joke about being unmarried without causing a family crisis. Janet raised an eyebrow. Oh. What kind of joke? I just said that since Graham and I aren't technically married yet, I could still try other men if I wanted to. You know, just teasing. But everyone acted like I'd announced I was having an affair. Janet's expression shifted slightly. Oh, wow. And how did Graham take that? Like you'd expect, no sense of humor whatsoever. Aurelia shrugged. Sometimes I think he's lucky I even stay with him, you know. After Janet walked away, Linda looked uncomfortable. Aurelia, maybe you shouldn't. What? I'm just being honest. Graham needs to learn that he can't control everything I say and do. But as the morning progressed, Aurelia began to notice things. Conversations that stopped when she walked by. Glances exchanged between co-workers. By lunchtime, She was starting to feel paranoid. "Is it just me, or is everyone acting weird today?" she asked Linda as they sat in the cafe across from their office building. "Well," Linda hesitated, "Janet might have mentioned your dinner story to a few people. So people are talking about you and Graham, about Victor." Aurelia felt a flash of anger. "Let them talk. I haven't done anything wrong." "I know that, but you know how office gossip works. Someone heard you say Graham should feel lucky you stay with him, and now there are rumors that you're exploring your options." "Maybe I am," Aurelia said defiantly. "Maybe it's healthy to keep your options open until you're actually married." Linda looked genuinely concerned now. "Aurelia, listen to yourself. You're talking about the father of your daughter, the man you're supposed to marry in 6 months." "I'm talking about not being taken for granted," Aurelia shot back. "Men need to be kept on their toes, Linda. The moment they think they have you completely figured out is the moment they stop trying." That afternoon, Aurelia's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Called Graham to smooth things over. He seemed very distant. What exactly did you say last night?" Before she could respond, another notification popped up. Her banking app was asking her to verify her identity. Apparently someone had changed the password on their shared checking account. Someone. As if she didn't know exactly who. Aurelia tried logging in with the old password, then variations of it. Nothing worked. A cold realization settled in her stomach. Graham had locked her out of their joint account. She immediately called him. "Graham, what the hell? Why can't I access our bank account?" "Because I changed the password," he said calmly. "I'll give you the new one when we talk tonight." "Talk about what? Graham, you're being ridiculous. It was a joke at dinner." "Was it a joke when you told your co-workers I should feel lucky you stay with me?" Aurelia's blood ran cold. "Who told you that?" "Does it matter? Is it true?" I was just venting to Linda. You know how you get sometimes." "How I get?" "Controlling, jealous. You act like you own me, Graham." The line was quiet for so long she thought he'd hung up. "I'll be home at 6, he said finally. "We need to talk." The dial tone left Aurelia staring at her phone, her heart racing. This was getting out of hand. Graham was being dramatic, turning a simple misunderstanding into some kind of relationship crisis. She texted Victor, "Having the worst day. Graham is being impossible." His response came back quickly. "Want to grab a drink after work? You sound like you need to vent." Aurelia stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of her knew this was exactly the kind of thing Graham was worried about, but another part of her, the part that felt cornered and misunderstood, wanted nothing more than to spend time with someone who actually appreciated her company. "Rain check," she typed back. "Family drama to deal with." But even as she sent the message, she found herself wondering what would have happened if she'd said yes. 3 days later, the tension in the Dorsey household had settled into a cold, uncomfortable routine. Graham left early for work and came home late. Aurelia found herself walking on eggshells, unsure how to bridge the gap that seemed to widen with each passing day. "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy eat dinner with us anymore?" Nora asked on Thursday evening, pushing her chicken nuggets around her plate. Aurelia forced a bright smile. "Daddy's just been busy at work, sweetheart. You know how important his job is." But even as she said it, she felt a familiar resentment building. Graham was punishing her, and by extension, punishing Nora, over something so trivial. It wasn't fair. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victor. "How are you holding up? Still dealing with the fallout from dinner?" Despite everything, Aurelia felt a warm flutter in her chest. At least someone cared about how she was feeling. "It's been rough," she typed back. "Graham's barely speaking to me." "That's rough. Want some company? I could bring takeout and we could watch a movie, just as friends." Aurelia hesitated. She knew Graham would hate the idea of Victor coming over, especially while they were fighting. But that was exactly the point, wasn't it? She was tired of walking on eggshells, tired of having her friendships policed. "That sounds nice," she replied. Nora would love to see you. An hour later, Victor arrived with Chinese food and his easy smile. Nora immediately perked up. She'd always liked Uncle Victor, as she called him. He was fun in a way that Graham, with his careful routines and sensible bedtimes, never quite managed to be. So, Victor said as they settled on the couch with their containers of lemonade, "Want to talk about what's really going on?" Aurelia glanced at Nora, who was absorbed in her cartoon. "It's just, I feel like I can't breathe sometimes. Graham wants everything to be so perfect, so controlled. God forbid I make a joke or have an opinion that doesn't align with his master plan." "That sounds exhausting," Victor said, and the sympathy in his voice made something in Aurelia's chest loosen. "It is. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd made different choices, you know?" Victor's eyes met hers, and for a moment the air between them felt charged with possibility. It's never too late to make different choices. They were interrupted by the sound of Graham's key in the front door. Aurelia felt her stomach drop as she heard his footsteps in the entryway. "Daddy!" Nora called out, jumping up from the couch. Graham appeared in the doorway, his face carefully neutral as he took in the scene. Aurelia and Victor on the couch, takeout containers scattered across the coffee table, the warm, intimate atmosphere of an evening shared. "Victor," he said evenly, "I didn't know you were coming over." "Hey, man," Victor said, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "Just thought I'd bring some food by. You know how it is. Aurelia's been having a rough week." Graham's eyes flicked to Aurelia. "Has she?" "Graham," Aurelia said quickly, "Victor was just being nice. I told him about, our disagreement." "Our disagreement," Graham repeated slowly. "Is that what we're calling it?" Victor looked between them, finally sensing the undercurrent. "Maybe I should go." "No," Aurelia said, perhaps too quickly. "You don't have to go. Graham, can I talk to you in the kitchen?" Graham followed her, his movements careful and controlled. Once they were out of earshot, Aurelia turned to face him. "Before you say anything, I'm not going to say anything," Graham interrupted quietly. "You're an adult. You can have whoever you want in our house." The way he said "our house" made it sound temporary, conditional. Aurelia felt a spike of panic. "Graham, you're being paranoid. Victor is your friend. He's been our friend for years." "I know exactly who Victor is," Graham said. "The question is whether you do." That night, after Victor left and Nora was in bed, Aurelia found Graham in his home office, working late on his laptop. "We need to talk," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Do we?" "Yes. This silent treatment thing isn't working. We have a daughter to think about." Graham saved his work and closed the laptop. "You're right. We do have a daughter to think about." Something in his tone made Aurelia nervous. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been doing a lot of thinking this week. About what kind of environment we're creating for Nora. About what kind of example we're setting. Graham, if this is about Victor coming over..." "It's not about Victor." Graham stood up, and for the first time in days he looked directly at her. "It's about us. About whether we want the same things anymore." Aurelia felt the conversation slipping away from her, heading toward territory she wasn't ready to explore. "Of course we want the same things. We're getting married. We're building a life together." "Are we? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're building a life that doesn't include me. At least, not in any meaningful way." "That's not true." "Isn't it? When was the last time you talked about our future without mentioning what you're giving up? When was the last time you seemed happy about our engagement instead of treating it like a prison sentence?" Aurelia opened her mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because somewhere, buried beneath all her justifications and rationalizations, she knew he was right. "I'm going to stay at Simon's tonight," Graham said, pulling a small overnight bag from the closet. "Give us both some space to think." "Graham, don't be dramatic. We can work this out." He paused at the door, his hand on the light switch. "Can we? Because I'm not sure you want to." After he left, Aurelia sat alone in their bedroom, staring at her phone. Without really thinking about it, She opened her text conversation with Victor. "Thanks for tonight," she typed. It meant a lot to have someone who actually listens. His response came back quickly. "Anytime. You deserve better than this." Aurelia stared at the message, her heart racing. You deserve better than this. When was the last time Graham had made her feel like she deserved better? When was the last time he'd made her feel like she deserved anything at all? She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice the small red light blinking in the corner of the room. The home security camera that Graham had installed months ago for safety, quietly recording everything. The weekend passed in a blur of awkward silences and careful politeness. Graham returned home Sunday evening, but the distance between them felt wider than ever. They moved around each other like polite strangers, speaking only when necessary, both trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Nora's sake. Monday brought a return to routine, but Aurelia found herself increasingly restless. At work, she caught herself checking her phone constantly, hoping for messages from Victor. When he suggested meeting for coffee after work, she said yes without hesitation. "You look tired," Victor observed as they sat in a corner booth at the cafe near her office. "I am tired," Aurelia admitted, "tired of walking on eggshells, tired of feeling like everything I do is wrong." "Maybe the problem isn't what you're doing," Victor said carefully. "Maybe the problem is that you're with someone who makes you feel that way." Aurelia felt a dangerous thrill at his words. "Victor, I'm just saying you're an amazing woman. You're funny and smart and beautiful. You shouldn't have to dim your light for anyone." Their hands were almost touching on the table. Aurelia could feel the heat radiating from his skin, could see the way he was looking at her, like she was something precious, something worth fighting for. "I should go," she said, but she didn't move. "Should you, or do you think you should?" The distinction felt important, revolutionary even. How long had she been living her life based on what she thought she should do instead of what she wanted to do? When she got home that evening, Graham was in the kitchen making dinner. The domestic scene should have felt comforting, but instead it felt suffocating. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up from the stove. "Fine." Aurelia set down her purse, feeling guilty for no reason she could name. "Yours?" "Fine." They ate dinner in near silence, Nora chattering about her day at school, while her parents responded with distracted murmurs. After Nora went to bed, Graham disappeared into his office again, leaving Aurelia alone with her thoughts and her phone. She found herself scrolling through Victor's social media, looking at photos of him at parties, at restaurants, living what looked like a free and uncomplicated life. When had her own life become so small, so constrained? Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "Can't stop thinking about our conversation earlier. You deserve to be happy, Aurelia." Before she could second-guess herself, she typed back, "I've been thinking about it too." "What would make you happy?" The question hung on her screen, simple and loaded with possibility. What would make her happy? Not this careful dance around Graham's feelings. Not this constant sense that she was failing to live up to some impossible standard. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "I've forgotten." "Want to remember? We could grab dinner tomorrow, somewhere nice, just to talk." Aurelia stared at the message, her heart pounding. This was crossing a line, and they both knew it. But the alternative, another evening of stilted conversation and careful avoidance, felt unbearable. "Okay," she typed before she could change her mind. The next evening, Aurelia told Graham she was having dinner with Linda. The lie came easily, which should have concerned her more than it did. She met Victor at an upscale bistro across town, somewhere she was unlikely to run into anyone she knew. "You look beautiful," Victor said when she arrived, and the simple compliment made her feel more alive than she had in weeks. Over wine and conversation, Aurelia found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in months. Victor listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, made her laugh. He made her feel interesting, desirable, worth pursuing. "I keep thinking about what you said," she told him as they shared dessert, "about deserving to be happy. You do deserve it, Victor said, his hand covering hers on the table. Life's too short to settle. When he walked her to her car, the goodnight kiss felt inevitable. It was soft, tentative at first, then deeper as Aurelia allowed herself to sink into the moment. For the first time in months, she felt fully present, fully alive. I should feel guilty, she murmured against his lips. But you don't. No, she realized with surprise. I don't. The next few days passed in a haze of secret texts and stolen moments. Aurelia felt like she was waking up from a long sleep, rediscovering parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. When Graham tried to initiate conversations about their relationship, she deflected, claiming she needed more time to think. Time to think about what? Graham asked Friday night as they stood in their bedroom, the space between them feeling like an ocean. About us. About what we both want. I know what I want, Graham said quietly. I want my fiancé back. I want the woman who used to laugh at my jokes and talk about our future and act like being with me was something she chose, not something she was stuck with. Aurelia felt a flash of irritation. Maybe that woman was just pretending to be someone she wasn't. Or maybe, Graham said, his voice barely above a whisper, she's pretending now. That weekend, while Graham took Nora to his mother's house, Aurelia invited Victor over. They ordered pizza, watched movies, and talked for hours. When he kissed her on the couch where she and Graham had shared so many evenings, she didn't pull away. This is crazy, she whispered. The best things usually are, Victor replied. They didn't sleep together. Aurelia wasn't ready to cross that final line. But the emotional intimacy felt just as significant. For the first time in years, she felt seen, appreciated, desired. Sunday evening brought Graham and Nora home, along with a return to reality. Aurelia tried to act normal, but she felt like she was glowing with her secret, like anyone who looked at her would know immediately what had happened. How was your weekend? Graham asked as he unpacked Nora's overnight bag. Quiet, Aurelia said. Relaxing. Graham nodded, but something in his expression made her nervous. That's good. You've seemed stressed lately. That night, as Aurelia lay in bed pretending to sleep, she heard Graham moving around downstairs. When she crept to the top of the stairs, she saw him in his office, hunched over his computer with a USB drive in his hand. A cold realization washed over her. The security cameras. She'd forgotten about the security cameras, but as she watched Graham's shoulders shake slightly, she felt more anger than fear. How dare he spy on her? How dare he violate her privacy like that? She was so focused on her indignation that she missed the sound of him making a phone call, his voice too low to make out the words. She didn't see him carefully labeling the USB drive and placing it in his briefcase. She had no idea that her world was about to come crashing down. Aurelia woke Monday morning to an empty bed and the sound of Graham moving around downstairs. When she came down to the kitchen, he was already dressed for work, his briefcase by the door, his movements efficient and purposeful. You're up early, she said, trying to gauge his mood. Big day at the office, he replied without looking at her. I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up. Something in his tone made her stomach clench, but before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, leaving her alone with Nora and a growing sense of unease. At work, Aurelia found herself distracted, checking her phone constantly for messages from Victor. When he suggested meeting for lunch, she agreed immediately, desperate for the comfort of his attention. You seem anxious, Victor observed as they sat in their usual cafe. Graham's acting strange, distant, more than usual, I mean. Victor reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Maybe he's finally realizing he can't control you anymore. The gesture was meant to be comforting, but Aurelia felt exposed, vulnerable. What if he knows? About us, I mean. What if he does? Aurelia, you're not married. You haven't done anything wrong. But even as Victor said it, Aurelia knew it wasn't that simple. She had done something wrong. Maybe not legally, but morally. She was engaged, living with Graham, raising a child with him. The technicality of not being married felt flimsy in the face of that reality. "I should probably cool things down," she said reluctantly, "at least until Graham and I figure out where we stand." Victor's expression darkened slightly. "Is that what you want? Or is that what you think you should want?" The question echoed his words from weeks earlier, but this time it felt more like pressure than liberation. Meanwhile, across town, Graham sat in the office of Patricia Hendricks, one of the city's most respected family law attorneys. The USB drive sat on the desk between them, along with printed bank statements, phone records, and a detailed timeline Graham had prepared with his accountant's precision. "Mr. Dorsey," Patricia said after reviewing the materials, "I have to ask, what outcome are you hoping for here?" Graham was quiet for a long moment. "I want to protect my daughter, and I want to protect myself. From a legal standpoint, you're in a strong position. You're not married, so there's no divorce proceedings to worry about, but you do have a child together, which complicates custody matters. What about the house? The joint accounts? The house is in your name only, correct? And you've been the primary breadwinner." Graham nodded. "Aurelia works part-time, but most of our income comes from my job." Patricia made notes on her legal pad. "The security footage is compelling. Along with the phone records showing extensive communication with Mr. Shields, it paints a clear picture of emotional infidelity at minimum." "I don't want to destroy her," Graham said quietly. "I just want this to end cleanly, with dignity. Mr. Dorsey, I have to ask, have you considered counseling? Sometimes these situations can be resolved without legal intervention." Graham thought about the woman he'd fallen in love with 8 years ago, the one who'd laughed at his terrible jokes and talked excitedly about their future together. Then he thought about the woman who'd publicly humiliated him at dinner, who'd brought another man into their home while their daughter was present, who'd lied about her whereabouts while conducting an emotional affair. "I think we're past that point," he said. That evening, Aurelia came home to find Graham in the kitchen, cooking dinner with unusual focus. Nora was at the table doing homework, and the scene felt almost normal, except for the tension radiating from Graham's shoulders. "Smells good," Aurelia said cautiously. "Nora requested spaghetti and meatballs," Graham replied without turning around. During dinner, Graham was attentive to Nora but barely acknowledged Aurelia's presence. When Nora asked if they could all watch a movie together after dinner, Graham gently explained that he had work to do. "But we never do family stuff anymore," Nora protested, her voice small and confused. Aurelia felt a stab of guilt. Their daughter was caught in the middle of this mess, and it wasn't fair to her. "Maybe this weekend, sweetheart," Aurelia said, shooting a meaningful look at Graham. "Maybe," Graham agreed, but his tone suggested otherwise. After Nora was in bed, Aurelia found Graham in his office again, surrounded by papers and files. "We need to talk," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Graham looked up from his work, his expression carefully neutral. "About what?" "About us. About Nora. About how we're going to move forward." "Are we moving forward? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've already moved on." Aurelia felt her defenses rise. "What's that supposed to mean?" Graham reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. "It means I know about Victor." Aurelia's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Know what about Victor?" "I know about the dinner last Tuesday, the one where you told me you were with Linda." Graham's voice was steady, matter of fact. "I know about the text messages, the phone calls, the afternoon he spent here while I was at work." "Graham, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain lying to me repeatedly while conducting an emotional affair with my former friend." The word former hit Aurelia like a physical blow. "It's not an affair. We're just friends." Graham opened the folder and slid a stack of printed text messages across the desk. "Just friends?" Aurelia's hand shook as she recognized her own words. I keep thinking about what it would be like if we'd met at a different time. You make me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Sometimes I wish I could just run away from all of this. Graham, these are taken out of context. What context makes this okay? Graham asked, his voice finally showing emotion. What context makes it acceptable for my fiancé to tell another man that she wishes she could run away from our life together? Aurelia felt cornered, desperate. You don't understand what it's been like. Living with your constant judgment, your need to control everything. Victor listens to me. He makes me feel valued. And I don't. The question lingered between them, heavy and final. Aurelia wanted to say yes, that Graham still made her feel valued, but she couldn't. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped feeling seen by him, stopped feeling like a partner, and started feeling like an obligation. I think we both know the answer, Graham said quietly, closing the folder of evidence with calm precision. I'll be at Simon's for a few days. We need space. By the time she found his note the next morning, Nora's lunch is packed. We'll talk soon about arrangements. He was gone. The word arrangements sent a chill through her. She called in sick, phoned her mother, desperate for validation. He's overreacting, she said. It's not like I slept with Victor. Evelyn's voice was soothing but uncertain. Of course not, dear. Graham can be controlling. Even that comfort rang hollow. Aurelia knew the truth. She had crossed a line. That afternoon, Nora's teacher mentioned the child's anxiety and slipping focus. The guilt burned through her. Later, when Victor called, his voice was nervous. I think we should take a step back, he said. This is getting too complicated. The call ended, leaving her in silence. And that's when it all hit her. The enormity of what she'd destroyed. Graham was gone. Victor had vanished. Nora was caught in the wreckage. For the first time, Aurelia stopped defending herself and simply wept, realizing that she hadn't just lost her family. She'd dismantled it, piece by piece, with her own hands. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier who made Aurelia's hands tremble before she even opened it. Inside were words that ended her world: petition for custody and support. Graham wanted primary custody of Nora, citing an unstable home environment and emotional infidelity. He wanted her out of the house in 30 days. When her lawyer, David Chen, reviewed the documents, his verdict was grim. Graham's case was airtight. There were texts, statements, even security footage of Victor kissing her on the couch where Nora played. We'll focus on damage control, David said, but Aurelia could already see the doubt in his eyes. At the hearing, Graham sat composed beside his attorney while hers struggled to defend her. The evidence was relentless. Her lies, her messages, her public humiliation of him. When asked to speak, Aurelia's voice broke. I love my daughter. I made mistakes, but I'm not a bad mother. The judge's reply was quiet, final. This court must prioritize the child's well-being. Temporary custody to Mr. Dorsey. Supervised visitation for Ms. Dorsey. Outside, Graham told her softly, it doesn't have to be forever. Prove you can put Nora first. But Aurelia couldn't hear him through the roar of her own regret. She'd chased excitement and validation and lost everything: her family, her home, her child. Watching Graham drive away with Nora, she finally understood. Some mistakes don't just ruin love, they rewrite who you are. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.